Thank you, Aftab. Hello, everyone. My name is Arida. I actually work for the National Telecom Regulatory Authority of Egypt, but I'm here today. I'm here today on behalf of the International Telecommunications Union to actually present on their recent activities for the developing the IXPS system in the Arab region. And I would like to start off by thanking MENOG for giving me the opportunity to be here, and also to Lebanon for hosting this meeting. So in my presentation today, I will try to give you an overview on a recent study that was performed over the course of the last 2 years by the ITU Arab Regional Office. It actually was focusing on analyzing the landscape of peering and interconnection in the Arab region with the aim of advancing a regional roadmap among Arab governments to address missed opportunity and develop this ecosystem. The study had actually two specific goals, and it was at first decided that it would build on previous work. And to give you a bit of the context, over the past decade, there has been repeatedly a commitment expressed by Arab governments jointly to develop the peering ecosystem and to interconnect networks in the Arab region. And so this study comes just to complement this work, or just to do another milestone there with two objectives, namely to grow and develop the IXP ecosystem in the different Arab countries, but also to boost inter-regional connectivity and peering on a pan-Arab level. The approach used was mainly to analyze data that was gathered through surveys and through reports and statistics from various sources, and to assess accordingly the ecosystem, elaborate a vision and a roadmap, which was actually discussed in Bahrain last October among Arab regulators in a specific workshop in order to agree on a way forward and plug in and collaborate with other regional activities in order to implement it. So the study at first looked at factors for growth in specific to the region, and the different factors that affect the IXP growth in terms of macroeconomic factors, the infrastructure development, but also, and most importantly, a focus on national regulations and regional policies, as well as the engagement of community and stakeholders. So, and again, the map that is probably known to everyone here, that may have had a few developments, but still a gap in this region, in the Arab region, is clearly identified in terms of IXP density, which means that the region has potential for growth and potential for further development. So one of the main issues that was different than the previous works done was not to look at peering as just a fact to keeping local traffic within the region, but also to look at the different benefits of peering and how it can enhance the internet economy in the Arab region in terms of affordability, service quality, economies of scale for ISPs, but also for local content providers, also in terms of reliability and resilience of the network in this part of the world. And another point that was also tried to be addressed is how to maximize opportunities for IXPs in the region to grow into regional hubs, or cities to grow into hub cities in order to serve the second purpose of boosting regional interconnection. So clearly everyone knows that peering is good, and this is something that has been addressed many, many times. But how does it look for the specifics of the Arab region? Is there really need to boost that, or is the region already naturally served by the potential that exists in it? And a quick look at the region, and I'm sorry if some of the text is in white and not very clear, but a continuously growing percentage of internet traffic and of IP traffic and of broadband subscribers which is not completely in line with the growth in IXPs. So growth in traffic is not really served or is not really mimicked by a similar growth in IXPs. But the region also enjoys, as a region, an opportunity to have some commonality, because not only because of geographical proximity, but also because the content it seems to be common between the users. User trends are also similar because of commonalities of language and culture. So, so there is an opportunity. Nevertheless, the traffic between Arab countries continues to bounce through various passes across the world, mainly through Europe, but also through Asia. And the need is more tangible as we see smart cities developing, as we see video content increasing, as we see bandwidth-greedy applications growing. We see that this is all being affected very much by the lack of peering infrastructure. Nevertheless, one can say that in terms of cable infrastructure, the region is well served and seems to be one of the consistently growing, among one of the most consistently growing regions of the world, maybe because of its characteristics, geographical characteristics, the path that the crossroad between Europe and Asia that it is serving, and also because maybe it doesn't have any landlocked countries. In terms of infrastructure, that does seem to be a problem. In terms of internet bandwidth, on the other hand, we see that there is a growth that is in Africa and the Middle East, if we take them together, because the Arab region spans about both. You can't really find specific data for the Arab region, but you see that there is continuous growth in this region at very high rates. If we look at the internet bandwidths, we can see that, for example, if you look at the links that connecting Africa and the Middle East, you see that there are much less than those connecting it to Europe and to other regions. So, as said, the region enjoys good international connectivity because of its characteristics, but on a sub-regional level, the infrastructure seems to be less developed. We've heard recently about from Ojero, I think it was, about cable infrastructure that would go across the region. But I think it's fair to say, or the study has actually showed, that interlinking of sub-regions, especially if we're talking about linking the GCC region with the North African region, is yet to be developed. It is not well served by the current design of the submarine cables. And this is why internet traffic continues to be mainly exchanged through Europe over submarine cables. There are, of course, terrestrial infrastructure, but there are no considerable peering sessions that go over that infrastructure, and it's predominantly used by incumbents for other traffic. So operators in the region, they continue to grow their transit services to Europe and to Asia, and they increase interconnection capacities at major exchange points in Europe. On the other hand, ISPs, local ISPs, in order to cut down on expenses and to have a more efficient use of their bandwidths, they tend to deploy caches in order to have better revenues and a more cost-efficient network. So despite all that, and despite this localization and the use of caching, we see that outbound traffic continues to raise, which means that there is appetite for usage and there is still high potential for growth, which can be addressed by developing the peering infrastructure. And another look from another way to the IP traffic flow in the Arab region, and those graphs are courtesy of Martin Levy, and they're a bit maybe old, but as far as I understand, there are not much differences in the Arab region, maybe a few or two, but it's clearly, and they represent IPv4 and IPv6 IP traffic flow. So clearly, if you compare the Arab region on the left to the European region on the right, you can see that country-to-country peering relationships are less developed, much less developed in the Arab region, and there are poor interconnection between Arab countries, sometimes completely non-existent. There are no none between Arab countries, no actual link. So the black spot in the middle, that represents the rest of the world, and this is where the interconnection is more developed, not between the Arab countries. So the study also looked at the relation of the traffic and the infrastructure to content. And it was clearly identified that there is a vicious circle that needs to be broken. So on one side, we have local infrastructure that is highly priced, specifically interconnection at landing stations. So, and on the other hand, scarcity of local content and locally hosted content means that there is no actual incentive for operators to go and deploy infrastructure to reach out to within the region between countries, because on one side there is no need, on the other side it is expensive, so it makes no sense for them to do so. Accordingly, content players as well do not see a good incentive to come and expand to the region. This has been changing a bit, maybe over the last year, but still there's a lot of room for development here. And in order to achieve that, concrete measures need to be taken, and actually the political commitment that has been repeatedly expressed by Arab governments need to translate into actual actions by eliminating regulatory barriers for interconnection. So it comes with no surprise if we look at the regional landscape to see that the Arab region has the lowest numbers compared to other regions. Two important things to notice here is the number of dormant IXPs within the region. And so, so you can see that a good percentage of existing IXPs in the region are dormant. On the other hand, if you look at the average number of members, and those statistics come from PCH database, you can see that on average, number of members in Arab IXPs is quite low compared to other regions. One thing that the study did is to look at lessons from other regions. So a quick look was at the study that was performed by ISOC in the framework of the AU Access Project, which tried to actually quantify for African countries the effect of the transit versus peering ratio on the ISP revenues and monthly savings. And this has been important because one of the activities that have been repeatedly talked about within among Arab governments was actually what is the incentive for ISPs to grow peering. And so the findings of the study of ISOC was presented in the framework of the study, clearly showing that when you grow your peering versus transit ratio, there's a positive impact that you can realize as an ISP. So like I said, there's been a political commitment on the highest level, declarations by heads of states. Accordingly, groups were formed many times. Studies took place between 2011, 2016, and recently the latest study. And repeatedly, a need was expressed that there should be for the region a peering forum. But this is why I'm happy to see MENOG extending and focusing on peering and extending beyond the Middle East to also North African countries, which is a great thing, and I congratulate MENOG for that. Also stressed was the importance of collaboration between policymakers and regulators on one hand, and between operators on the other hand. So in that same spirit, the survey that was conducted spanned the Arab region. It went out to policymakers, to ISPs and operators, and to planned and active IXPs in the region. It explored, and it could be not very visible from here, but it explored membership policies and peering policies. It explored the role of government. It explored explored membership compositions, neutrality of the facility, fees, structure and operational model, licensing requirement and regulatory restrictions. for IXP services. And there are some findings that are interesting to look at. So there's a great diversity between traffic that is exchanged at peak time between the different IXPs. So you find some as low as 1 gigabit per second, others going up to 80. There's also a great divergence between membership size. You have running from a few to over 50. But for all the different IXPs, one thing is clear, that traffic and membership size is not at all proportional to the respective internet market development in those in the respective countries. Most IXPs have indicated mandatory multilateral peering policies that seems to be prevailing, which might be a reason why it's discouraging larger ISPs or IXPs actually to grow. Membership policies, as indicated by the survey respondent, seem to be quite progressive. So restrictions are mostly lifted. Nevertheless, if you look at membership compositions, they're generally covering ISPs with just a few exceptions, maybe from the GCC region. Other findings include that government role is prevailing in IXP setup. There are a few exceptions as well. But incumbents, they rarely join unless there is strong government involvement or incumbent involvement in the operation and management of the IXP. In most cases, there is either a license needed to operate or some regulatory restrictions on membership policies or on the way it is being managed. And there are also exceptions for that. One important finding is that cross-border interconnection is almost non-existent, maybe with an exception of 1 or 2, if I recall right. So you don't find operators from one country crossing over to the other country and peering over there. But there is a good perception of IXPs for the planned and active IXP that they do positively impact the local internet services, and this is a response that was received also by the regulators and policymakers that were surveyed. So accordingly, a gap was identified, and the gap more or less indicates the response that was received. We have very little active IXPs compared to the size of the user base in the region, and many are dormant. Cross-border interconnection are rare. There's a inter-regional gap between the regions, so there are countries that are more developed than others. Some are very much less developed or may have no IXP at all. And the one finding that was stressed, was identified, is that the peering landscape in the region is poorly measured. So there is not enough measurements for the region in order to be able to analyze in a good manner how to develop this. So in terms of local hosting and local content, still a lot of development is to be done here in order to boost interconnection. Also, one finding is that many incumbents still consider peering to be a threat to their transit business, even though they may be peering and some of the IXPs present, they still think that this could be a threat to their transit business. The legal environment has a lot of maturity. Also, this has been changing. I think we've seen many initiatives for draft laws and activities in that respect over the last year. Still, this is much needed if we were to attract international content players towards the region. There is need to have a strong legal environment and the rule of law. Cross-border policies and regulations need regional harmonization. There is none so far there is no work on a regional level in that respect. So basically, as I was saying, the political will is to be translated into concrete actions, and this is yet to be done. So one thing, and I thought I could share this with you, are the challenges of the regulatory environment in specific, because this is something that the study focused on being among Arab governments. So like I said, that international connectivity and cross-border interconnection are key drivers if we to develop the regional peering. So we have access policies to submarine cables are not conducive. Licensing of international connectivity is mainly combined with mobile and fixed licenses. If it's not a monopoly, it's combined with that, so it's inhibitive to new entrant to the market. Only big operators that can go to coverage obligations are able to acquire that license. Accordingly, due to that, we see high interconnection costs, but also regulatory fees imposed by regulators. The other challenges is the lack of, as I said, regional harmonization of the regulatory landscape and also licensing obligations that are required at the IXPs for peering. In Bahrain, a regional roadmap was presented and discussed among Arab governments, Arab regulators in specific. It has three main tracks. One is the regional harmonization to create an enabling environment. It looks at how to lift regulatory restrictions for IXP operation. It looks at how to review policies for limiting cross-border policies that limit cross-border interconnection between neighboring countries. It also looks at how to review, wide need to review costs of cross-connect and associated regulatory fees. There have been also some development in that, some recent activities in that area. Some countries have lowered those costs. Also, one thing, how to develop terrestrial cross-border connectivity and how to increase competition in that area, and how to harmonize the legal environment. The second track was was looking at the content industry and how to ensure that data-rich content heavy platforms are entitled to peer, but also how not to have policies that hinder the flow of traffic and flow of content between Arab countries. On the other hand, to boost content through maybe pan-Arab internet trade or regional commerce. The third track was the build of community, which is very important for the success of the IXP ecosystem, and how to create a knowledge platform. And this is where I think this work could plug in with the work that's being done by MENOG. So how to gather community support, to create a platform where exchanges, where exchange of ideas happen, skills development, maybe twinning between the different countries, but also use that platform to establish more measurements tool in order to measure the region. So as identified by regulators, important to consider is developing this system is a joint responsibility which requires work between the different stakeholders, be it government and policymakers or operators, as it should combine the political will of government with business cases that make sense to operators. We cannot enforce peering, that we know, governments know that. And one last thing to finalize is that peering is just a holistic view, and we need to consider it within the bigger ecosystem, not just as an objective in itself. Thank you very much, and sorry for taking more time.